Hi, welcome back. Today, we're exploring a simple question: the most effective way to max out your chances of retiring comfortably. And it might not be what you're thinking, because it is not about trying to chase down a six-figure salary or taking huge investment risks. It's actually about always paying attention to your finances. Ignoring what is going on with your money, it can cost you. New research from PensionBee shows that financial disengagement, as it's known, that can cost savers as much as £500,000 over their lifetime. So serious money. But when did you last check on your savings? Do you know how much you've set aside for retirement? Small decisions made today can transform your future because they give your money time to grow. And here's the good news. Staying engaged, it's not hard. And in this episode, we're going to show you how to do it.
When somebody says, "Can I talk to you about a pension?" which is about saving for your future, you've got these unconscious conflicts going on all the time.
We know that there are billions in lost pensions, and instead of feeling like, oh, I don't have much to start with, have you looked into where you've worked before and what pensions you have there?
Engaging with a pension doesn't have to be as overwhelming as sometimes we think it can be. It's really simple steps.
I'm Philippa Lamb, and just before we begin, if you haven't subscribed to the Pension Confident podcast yet, why not click right now so you never miss an episode? So we're talking about how to be financially engaged, and here with me I have Bola. She's a financial advisor, money columnist and author. Neil Bage is a behavioural expert and co-founder of Shaping Wealth. And from PensionBee, head of consumer PR, Laura Dunn-Sims. Hi everyone.
Hi.
Here's the usual disclaimer before we start. Please do remember, anything discussed on the podcast shouldn't be regarded as financial advice or legal advice, and when investing, your capital is at risk. Now, look, everyone, before we start telling people they need to pay more attention to their finances, I'm going to freely admit I have not always done this. I've definitely buried my head in the sand about money more than once. How about you? Have you always been good?
No.
I'm glad to hear. I'm feeling better already.
And you know, it's difficult. We have a gazillion competing priorities in life. Money is one of them. And unfortunately, it's the one that often falls by the wayside because, let's face it, it's a bit difficult. It's a bit complex.
It feels that way, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's right.
Laura, I mean, you know, you do this stuff for a living. Have you always been a good girl about it?
No, I've not. When I first left university, my first job, I actually opted out of my workplace pension because
I did this too.
Yeah, I wanted the extra money and I had no idea of the sort of benefits of saving into a pension. So I wouldn't do it now, but yeah, lesson learned.
Yeah, I didn't even bother to respond. I got an email and, would you like to be? And I didn't. And so, of course, it never happened. Yeah. Bola.
No. Mid-20s, I took a contracting job, which means I didn't get permanent benefits, like as a permanent employee.
Yeah.
So I just didn't think about my pension. So I was all thinking, oh, yeah, getting all the cash for a few years. And not once did I think about my pension. But I do think about it more now.
Well, yeah, as time goes on, I think we all think about it a bit more. But I mean, this is the trick, isn't it? Starting early. And it's like you say, we've all got a reason for not keeping a closer eye on our money. Life is busy, pensions can feel confusing. I mean, can you even remember your login details? Laura, we do need to do this, though, don't we? Because you've got this new research from PensionBee talking about this £500,000 potential loss of being disengaged from your pension. Where does that number come from? How does that work?
So our research found that savers who consistently engage with their pension throughout their working life typically have better retirement outcomes. And that's because small early actions, such as assessing how much you're contributing or how much you're paying in fees, that can really make a difference in later life. Basically, the more you know about the pension, the more tangible it becomes, and then you can make more informed decisions from there.
And the trick here, I'm going to keep saying this in this podcast, is starting early. Because as we mostly admitted around the table at the beginning, when you start out in work, you're just not thinking about this, are you? Yeah. So just getting your head around the fact that it's a thing that matters to you, might not matter now, but it's going to matter later. Hi, it's me, Philippa, just interrupting for a moment to say a big thanks to all of you who've subscribed to the Pension Confident podcast. Our mission is to help you feel more financially confident, and we are thrilled with the community we're growing here on YouTube. If you haven't already done it, hit that subscribe button right underneath this video so you never miss an episode. Meantime, enjoy the rest of this month's conversation. Neil, we're not great at doing that, are we? It feels so far away that you don't feel you need to keep an eye on it.
As humans, we have a really interesting challenge with our present self and our future self. And the future self, so the Neil Bage in the future, right? It's a stranger to me. And in order for me to engage with my future self, I need to use my imagination and kind of think, okay, who do I want that Neil to be when I reach 60 or 65 or whatever the date is, whatever the age is? But the challenge in that is not only am I relying on my imagination, I'm also trying to weigh up the day-to-day challenges of living life. You know, the bills and the holidays and all of the other things that are competing for my cognitive attention. And so we've always, as a species, had a really difficult time to put ourselves into a future state and make decisions today that will ultimately benefit me in the future. It's a notoriously difficult thing for us to do.
Yeah, that visualization, I mean, particularly when you're in your 20s, visualizing yourself in your 60s or your 70s, I mean, it feels almost impossible, doesn't it?
It's incredibly difficult, and I would say impossible. There's a great piece of research by Hal Hirschfield, you know, a professor in the US who is one of the world's leading authorities on future self. He created this app where it would age you and then say, I now need you to make some decisions. And what they found is people who looked at an aged version of themselves typically invested more money into their pension than someone who didn't. And it's not just picturing it, it's kind of planning for who you want to be. The other challenge is there's an amazing psychological phenomenon called the end of history illusion, whereby if you ask people, are you different to how you were 10 years ago? People go, yeah, I am. What about 20 years ago? Very different. 30? Oh, I don't recognize that person. Great. How much do you reckon you're going to change going forward in the next 10 years? And people will typically say, not a lot.
Really?
And it's called the end of history illusion because we believe that we are the finished article today. So that's playing out at the same time. So then when somebody says, can I talk to you about a pension, which is about saving for your future? You've got these unconscious conflicts going on all the time.
It's interesting, that, isn't it? And the other thing I'm thinking, Bola, is, you know, if you've got a pension, if you've been auto-enrolled into a workplace pension, whatever it is, there's that temptation kind of, well, job done, right? And kind of complacency sets in and you never think about it again.
Oh, absolutely, because you kind of tell yourself it's being taken care of, so I can't be asked to look at it. And, you know, I have conversations with people, ask, do you know what it's invested in? They say, I have no idea, because it takes away, as you said, the stress of competing with everyday life priorities and stuff. So you think, look, I've got some money in there, not sure how much it is, but it's doing something.
Laura, this is the thing, isn't it? And this is where the 500,000 comes in, that if you do think about it early, you can make a real difference to it. So can you talk us through the sort of missed opportunities that people have to engage with this?
Yeah, definitely. I think engaging with a pension doesn't have to be as overwhelming as sometimes we think it can be. It's really simple steps like understanding what your pension is invested in, moving from a poor performing fund, which might, you know, typically be giving you about a 3% annual return a year, to finding a better performing fund, for example, maybe giving you 7% annual return over your lifetime of sort of saving. That can add almost £500,000 to your pension. So it's those simple things like perhaps you've changed jobs, you have an old pot that you haven't thought about for a few years, you find it, you consolidate it into one pot if that makes sense to do so, and then you're only paying one set of fees instead of two. And then from there you can start planning and making those decisions in the future. That helps retirement feel so much more tangible.
In terms of the how you do all this, thinking that most people are definitely not experts on pensions, and you're thinking, okay, I don't even know how good my fund is. Is this a good thing? What I've got now, should I be somewhere else? I mean, how do you make those decisions? Where do you start with that?
So your pension provider should be able to help sort of provide fund sheets, which would give you an overview of sort of performance. There's also the government's Money Help website. They give free and partial advice, so they can help you sort of navigate that a bit more. There's lots of great educational tools like pension calculators, where you can sort of play around with your contribution amounts, change the age you want to retire at, and then that can really help you give a personalised view of what saving for retirement could look like for you.
They're quite fun, those, aren't they, in a way? That whole thing of thinking, if I saved a bit more now, look, I could have a yacht when I'm 70. But I think they're, as part of the visualisation process that you were talking about, you know, I think they're pretty good for that, don't you?
Anything that I can look at, anything I can engage with that allows me to put a piece in the jigsaw puzzle, if you like, is helpful. And the more it feels real, the more it feels achievable, you know, the more likely I am to then engage with it. The more I see something and I go, I will never, ever do that. I will never reach that figure. It becomes a barrier to entry for any of us, right? That's no different to other walks of life. You don't really need to go to the gym and pay £50 a month for gym membership if you've never been to the gym, because the likelihood is you're not going to stick it out, because you'll go to the gym, you'll forget how difficult it is. You'll see all these other people around you pumping weights and doing all the things, and you'll go, oh, I'm not like them. And so you kind of retreat from that. That's the same as our money life. It's no different. If you see something that you go, but that's not me, it makes it notoriously difficult to engage with it. It needs to feel real.
So this is setting realistic goals then, not setting some crazy aspirational thing and then thinking, I'm going to fail before I've even started. I mean, the gym is a great analogy, I think. That whole thing, you walk in and think, this is just never going to be me. These people are so fit and gorgeous.
That's why I've never joined a gym. It's never me.
You see, I go all the time.
I just stare at people in the corner like, wow, maybe one day I'll be there, but I'm just going to stay over here for now.
Yeah, but at least you're going, Bola, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you can be one of those people, I think. I wonder as well if with pensions, I mean, old age, no one's looking forward to it, right? We push it away. Why would you want to think about it? Isn't that another barrier that you're talking about financing a time of your life that you don't really ever want to get to?
I mean, look, right, inertia is a really powerful issue or challenge for all of us, but deep-rooted behind this is a bigger challenge that we never address. It's the elephant in the room, right? So let's talk about it. Human beings have been around for 5.5 million years, right? We've been evolving for 5.5 million years. And we have a fine-tuned sense of how to engage with the world around us. We've developed the most amazing skills to communicate with each other, to spot danger, to spot threat, to lean into when people need help, to lean back when you feel that you're in danger, all that type of thing. But during the period that we've evolved, things have been invented that we as a species have had to try and adapt to. And one of them is money. Money's an invention.
Yeah.
And the thing is, we've been around for 5.5 million years. Money's been around for like 2,000 years. So it's a relatively new thing for the human brain to navigate. So pensions is a nuanced element of our money story. Borrowing, investing, saving, giving, earning, all of these dimensions of our money life bring with it challenges. And when you say save, that in and of itself is a difficult thing. When you then go, oh, by the way, I'm talking about a pension, it becomes nuanced in a way where people go, I can't even save £5 a month to do this. And what you're asking me to do something, and by the way, I'm not going to see it again for 35 years. The elephant in the room is we need to get better at addressing people's money life first before we go down to a deeper level, which is talking about a specific solution almost in a specific vertical. And if we can lift ourselves up and engage people at that level, I see this time and time again with our clients around the world, it completely transforms the conversation.
That's really interesting. And in the same way, even the concept of saving for the future in terms of human existence is quite a new idea, isn't it? Because we were lucky just to get through the day for quite, of human existence. So the idea of I'm saving for years ahead is quite a fresh thought, isn't it? I mean, if we think of ourselves as really animals, as you say.
But it is, right? If you go back to that 5.5 million year timeline, we've probably spent 99% of that time in what's known as an immediate return environment. If I was hungry, I ate. If I needed food, I went out, I'd hunt. We now live in a delayed return environment where the benefits of what I do aren't beneficial to me up until some future state. That messes with a brain that has just spent 5 million years in a world that screams now.
Get through the day.
And now we're saying later.
Yeah. See, I think we're getting at something here. Now, Bola, tell me, if we're thinking we've understood our difficulties here, the barriers, getting started on this, your tips for this. I mean, how do people, if people are thinking, this kind of is me and I know I need to do something, where do they start?
First of all, looking at where you've worked before and asking, did I have a pension there? And do I know where it is now? Because I think so many people, that we know that there are billions in lost pensions. And instead of feeling like, I don't have much to start with, have you looked into where you've worked before and what pensions you have there? So I think that's incredibly important. And it can give people a bit of hope, because that's what I did. And it gave me hope, to just feel like, okay, well, there's a pot of money and then there's another pot of money there, as opposed to before there was like maybe 5 different pots and I was just like, this feels quite overwhelming. That's what the government website is there for. You can check there.
Yes, they can find your lost pensions.
Yeah, they can find your lost pensions. Second of all, look into what you're investing in. Choose a type according to the attitude to risk that you have. I think that's incredibly important, because you may have a higher level of risk at particular stages of your life. I wouldn't say age, but stages of your life, because you get to a point where you're like, okay, I can afford the risk right now. And then you get to other points where you're like, absolutely not. Now's not really the time to be making those big decisions with my pension. Maybe I'm getting closer to my pension age. I don't really want to play with that money.
Yeah, I want to talk about risk, appetite for risk a bit later on. The other thing that's in my mind is contributions, because contributions are contributions, right? They just tick over. We don't think about it. But there is that thought as well, isn't there, that if we're talking about long-term savings growing with the power of compound interest, that marvellous thing, compound interest over time, even a small rise in how much more you put in your pot can make a huge difference, can't it? So it's about finding a little bit each month if you can. So those sort of savings, I think, can be helpful, can't they?
Exactly. I speak to people about that a lot. I say, can you put a bit more in? And sometimes they get, I don't want to. I'm like, you'll be happier in the future. It's so funny because you're trying to make them see their future self. And funny enough, what you said earlier, I can't wait to be older. I heard that you can become more unfiltered with age. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, 70 plus, I'm going to run amok just for saying anything I want to.
Okay, we're all back round the table when Bola's that age and we'll see what she says. I think, Laura, it's important to understand, isn't it? If we're talking about upping our contributions, people think, well, I just can't, and we're all strapped for cash. But it doesn't need to be a lot, does it? I mean, say you could manage £50 a month more. What's that going to look like if say 30 years?
Yeah, so if you made a £50 contribution every month for 30 years, that could give you about £27,000 extra in your pot in retirement. So it's a very small action, but because it's been done over a long period, it's, as we mentioned, compound interest. So it allows your money more time to grow and you start almost earning interest on the interest you're sort of earning. So it can be really powerful. And one thing we sometimes say is sometimes it's easier to think about it as a percentage rather than I'm going to add £50 more.
Okay.
If you think I'm going to increase my contribution by 1%, 2%, then you can do that in line with if you have a salary increase or perhaps you have a bonus.
Yes.
And it helps you think about sort of your overall financial position instead of maybe just plucking a number out of thin air because you think £50 sounds good sort of thing.
Laura, you raise a really, really valid point here. If I use this phrase, human beings are born as storytellers, we're not born as calculators, right? That phrase is important. In some regards, you say, okay, then I'm not going to baffle them with numbers. Great. But we can use it to our advantage because if we say, just increase it by 1%, people go, oh, that's a small number. Oh, I could do that. So we're using it to our advantage to get them to take action, right? It's not nefarious in any way. It's playing on the fact that if you said, oh, increase it by £50, they can model £50 in their head. They know what £50 buys.
Yeah.
They don't know what 1% buys because they can't do the maths. So so sometimes we need to be clever in how we communicate with people.
You can use technology as well, can't you, to do this stuff for you? Because I love tech, and this whole idea that you can set up all sorts of triggers with your banking. That when your savings get to a certain level, automatically, X amount goes into your pension or X amount goes into some other form of savings, so that you don't even have to have that conversation with yourself, and it just does it for you. Do you use those? I think they're really helpful.
Yeah, I do. I know that there's some apps where there's things like, oh, when it rains, put money away. But
that's sorry to me. I didn't
but
know
living in the UK, my friend does that. Living in the UK, I'm like, that is a very risky game because it rains a lot.
You say that, but it's really beneficial, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Literally saving for a rainy day. But yeah, I do use some of those.
Yeah, I think that's the thing, isn't it? And then you don't run that risk of, a year later thinking, oh, I got that rise, but actually I'm so used to it now, it doesn't feel like a rise.
Yes.
And I haven't done anything with that money. And I could have had a year of compound interest on that if I'd done it. Technology can really help take some of the muscle out of it for you, can't it?
They really, and I use an app and I invested a small amount of money in it. I've kept it and I use it and I've used it for 3 years. And basically all it does is it goes into my bank account every week. It does an analysis of what my income is and my expenditure, and it just takes a tiny amount and takes it away from me and puts it into a savings account. And I never see it. I don't miss it. I get an email off them saying, oh, we've just taken £43.62. And you go, amazing.
Okay.
Thanks. And then I move on with my life.
Yeah.
But when you go into the app and you look at how much money you've saved, it really is oh my word.
Yeah.
That's unbelievable. And that's both them, or it's automating, but it's also the power of compounding. because it's sitting there now and it's doing something.
I think sometimes we talk about this like, you should be doing this, you must do this, it's important to do it. But I'm not sure we talk enough about how nice it feels when you do.
Yeah.
Because it gives you a real, well, maybe it's just me.
Oh, I get it too.
But, you stash a little bit of money or you look at your balance. Apps, obviously, you can check your pension balance, whenever you want to. And you do get that little, that's nice.
I literally, what you said, I had an app doing that for 2 years, but I completely forgot about it. And one time I was strapped for money and I was like out the front door. I felt like I'd won the lottery. Although it was my money.
I mean, you did it, but it feels like a gift.
It felt great,
doesn't
it does, yeah.
The other barrier to all this is, investing. We talk about this a lot on the podcast, saving versus investing. Savings, you feel good about saving, but you can always get your hands on your money. Investing, tying it up, it is daunting. I mean, it's an uncertain world. Stuff happens. We know this. Job loss, whatever it might be, things that we're not expecting. Good things like, unexpectedly having, all sorts of nice things come to your life. It can be expensive. And that whole idea of, do I really want my money where I can never get at it? And I wonder whether we can talk a bit about how to get past that feeling of that being an overwhelmingly kind of permanent final thing to do, particularly women. And I think PensionBee have got data on this, haven't they? We've talked about it before, that women, we like to save, but we like to be able to get our hands on it. How do we do this, Neil? You're the one who's going to tell us the psychology behind this. How does that not feel overwhelmingly risky to us?
It doesn't, and we have to accept that it's overwhelming and risky. 2 words. It's overwhelming because every fibre of your brain is saying, live today. I can put my money into a savings account and the bank will say to me, oh, you're going to get 1% interest. And I can go, okay, fine. Will I lose my capital? Absolutely not. That gives me a safety barrier.
Yeah.
Now. I know that if I put 10 grand in, I'm going to get at least 10 grand back.
Yeah.
Whereas if I put £10,000 into a stock market or investment, there is a risk that I might get none back. Now, there's an interesting thing that we can help people with here, and that's understanding the difference between possibility and probability. We often confuse those 2 things. Is there a possibility that I could lose money in a stock market investment? Of course, but it's highly improbable. In other words, the chance of that happening statistically is incredibly slim, almost virtually zero. If you choose the right investment, right?
And it's a long-term investment.
The only way you're going to realise its value is if you stick the course, if you allow it to do what it needs to do. And that's difficult because, the roof breaks, the car's broken down, and whatever, life happens. But the evidence is crystal clear. The sooner you can start investing in a pension, the sooner you can put your money to work, the more you will get back at the point in life when you need it. Your future self will turn around and say, thank you so much for doing this for me.
I mean, Laura, that is the point that we should mention, because we've talked about keeping an eye across your finances. That's what the whole episode's about. But if you check your pension balance all the time, there's, for years and years, you're going to be looking at it. At some point, it's going to go down in value because, it's dependent on global financial situations you have no control over, your pension provider has no control over. So one day, and it's probably going to happen more than once, you're going to look at the number and think, oh, wow, that's less than I thought. So tell us, just reinforce the message why we shouldn't worry about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's important to remember that pensions are long-term investments, and particularly if you've got a long investment horizon, so you're not expecting to retire anytime soon, then you have a long time for the market sort of recover, and you can weather that market volatility quite well. Typically, as you get older, you can move to a pension that de-risks. So if you're, retiring very imminently, you wouldn't have big, nasty shock sort of thing.
We're balancing greed and fear, aren't we? We want great returns on our money. We are frightened of losing it, and there's perfectly natural emotions. Thinking about how we make objective decisions, Neil, I'm going back to the whole tell us how to do it thing. And we're aware, you can feel the fear when money worries really get you like nothing else. You can really feel the anxiety in your heart, can't you? When you think, oh, that's not as much as I thought it would be. That's bad news. And then the temptation to a knee-jerk decision is really there, like rush to action. How do we train ourselves to be less emotional about this and more rational?
Man, that's the $1 million question, right?
Yeah.
It really is, because money is an emotional lightning rod. The second you say money, the brain kind of goes into a place of, oh, We're going to have a difficult conversation. Do I want to really do this?
It's going to be complex.
It's going to be complicated. I'm going to hear jargon. I'm not going to understand. I'm going to look stupid. All of those things. And risk's an important part of the story here. We need to learn more about money from a personal perspective. What I mean by that is we all have money stories. We all grow up and hear things about money. We live our lives, hand to mouth, or, oh no, we save because we're a family of savers. All of these stories we hear as kids.
You get an identity, don't you?
We get an identity, and it's a money identity, and it becomes part of who I am. And the more we can be objective about the decisions we make, the more we can make them based on fact and evidence, the better the decision will ultimately be. We shouldn't really be making decisions about our long-term financial futures based on our gut or it feels right.
I've got a friend who's doing it.
Yeah, exactly. That's completely subjective. Congratulations. Buy your friend a bottle of champagne and say, well done. But the reality is their life is their life and your life is your life.
So countering that fear, that anxiety, I mean, there are rational things you can do. Like, we haven't talked about diversification. If you're worried about risk, if you're worried about a bad number that you're suddenly seeing on a screen, how do people do that so that they can balance out those risks?
Yeah, I think it's key to invest in different type of assets and ask yourself, what are you comfortable investing in? And maybe also ask yourself, what don't you know? Being British, we know about property quite well, but then you want to look at, stocks and shares or bonds, for example, and different ways that you can invest, and also different markets. If you invest in funds, maybe you don't know much about markets in Asia, for example, or America, but this is where you come in, you learn, you ask questions, and then just remember, you can take different percentages. So if there's something that you deem to be safer and you have a better understanding of, you maybe say, okay, I'm comfortable to put 40% of asset allocation into this one thing, and then maybe 20% in another. And just realize that how that number and what you put in can change over time.
Well, we need to wrap this up really now, but before we do that, I would like to get back to that whole idea of how do we embed these good habits that we're trying to form, because, Neil, you talked about the gym. We can think about diets all of us have been on. It's that whole sense of how do you make saving and investing feel fresh and worth doing for life. Bola, what have you got?
Well, automation is important. So wherever you can, automate money and contributions to your pension. Yeah, I would say that's key. And potentially if you can add more in manually yourself, maybe set quarterly reminders on top of the automation. That way you have two different sets of reminders, one that's happening automatically and one where you can say, I wonder, do I have a bit more money at the moment to put in?
I do that. Calendar reminders, that simple. Yeah. It's a nice idea, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Set them for weekends, though, because if you set them in the week, you don't do it. I speak from experience here because life gets busy. Yes. And then before you know it, you've forgotten about that calendar reminder. Laura?
Yeah, well, when it comes to my pension, I'm going to have a home pot sort of approach. So I'm going to have one pot that I sort of keep throughout my career, and then as I go through all my old pots, I'm just going to move into the home pot. So the idea is I should hopefully always have only 1 to 2 pension.
Yeah, simplification. I think there's a lot to be said for that, isn't there? I mean, how many more passwords do we need to remember?
Honestly.
So, yeah, I know. Thank you all very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone for listening. It seems to me this is all about looking after the pennies and watching them turn into pounds eventually. If you're enjoying this series, do give us a rate and a review. It really helps us reach more listeners like you. And if you've missed an episode, do not worry. You can catch up anytime on your favourite podcast app, YouTube, or if you're a PensionBee customer, in the PensionBee app. Next month, we're going to be looking at how to stay on top of your finances if you're shifting careers. You might be reskilling into a whole new line of work, becoming self-employed, maybe in later life, or even starting a business. We are all having to be more agile in our working lives, and we'll have plenty of tips and inspiration to help guide you through your next step. Just a final reminder, anything discussed on the podcast shouldn't be regarded as financial advice or legal advice, and when investing your capital is at risk. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time.